issue is prevalence, not just a financial kind of gain. So it's your level of value, which we kind of try and track. So at Screen on World Oceans Day, the maximum amount of people who would have seen it was 7,000 in terms of ticket sales. But in terms of press awareness and discussions via NGOs such as Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, it was talked about with, I think it was the figure, something like 500,000 people were talking about it, but only 7,000 could have physically seen the film at that point. The film then was shown to a number of kind of lead people in food suppliers, Pret a Manger and Marks and Spencer's both changed their food policy on the basis of watching the film. So in terms of where we mark our value and how we see that as being an effective film, the fact that they changed their tuna buying policies is kind of worth millions compared to taking in an exceeding amount of money in the box office.
Very rapidly I kind of realised I needed a platform with, you know, sort of guaranteed audience, and we're currently developing it with Gaydar Nation, the big kind of social, well, it's a dating site initially, but they're kind of branching out to a social media site. And that's changed the whole kind of perspective really, because they've got like 5 million registered users. They've got fantastic brand relationships anyway, and essentially, you know, with it being such a captive audience, God, that sounds like Clockwork Orange or something, doesn't it? But you know, with such a really targeted audience, I mean, ordinarily you could expect to get about 10% of that 5 million people, you know, as kind of as unique viewers, but we reckon we can kind of push it to about 50% with it being such a really targeted audience. So we're looking at, you know, 2 million, which is a huge, potentially for unique people, you know, for an original kind of web series. So it was very much about, audience was always, from a creative point of view, was always in my kind of, you know, my back of my mind all the time I was writing it. But very, very rapidly, you know, as a kind of like commercial venture, you need to know the audience because the brands want to know who's going to see it and how many and when, etc., etc.
Okay, so using our experience from the work we did with Freeview earlier on in the decade, then with FreeSat, and then with the emergence of iPlayer over the last couple of years, what we're seeing is very much following on from what Ed was talking about earlier about a large number of people are now consuming TV through the internet, and they're using devices that aren't necessarily appropriate to watching TV, so a laptop, a mobile phone. And it's really an attempt to kind of say, well, actually the natural place to consume television is in the living room on a TV. How can we go about creating a platform that will enable people to produce content in a way that's similar and with the low kind of overheads that they need to produce content for the web, but actually get people to consume it on a TV, you know, the sort of mythical 8-foot experience that everyone talks about. You can share it with your friends by sitting in front of the actual same TV set rather than watching it and then texting your mate saying, did you see that show? It's all about a kind of an experience, a shared experience, and really the BBC's interest in Canvas, because the BBC isn't alone now as part of the Canvas Consortium, there's sort of 6 other venture partners in there, is that we're really interested in keeping it open and free and really trying to reduce the barriers to entry, because what Canvas offers you is a distribution mechanism that isn't the traditional broadcast mechanism if you don't want to use that. The model that's been talked about is something very, very similar to the Apple App Store for the iPhone. It's a sort of area where you go and content will be ranked, and okay, you could pay and get a premier ranking on the platform, but there will be opportunities for people to get on the platform without having to pay. Okay, you might have to search a little bit to find it, but there will be access to that type of content. So if you wanted to portray your series on there, then there will be a mechanism for you to go about getting onto the platform to get it on there.
I work in games, and that means I'm the ugly cousin you don't want to know. Except now you do want to know us, because apparently everyone's playing games rather than watching films. That's how we film. We're always compared to film. We are a completely different industry. Our production model is different. Our terminology is different. And the strange thing is, we suffer from a lot of the same problems, having said all that. People think that games are like this big shining light and it's the future. But we're still quite a young industry. We've only been going since, in reality, sort of the 70s for arcade games, really, and then early 80s. And I'm just going to just summarise the funding model that we work to. And I'm told by film people this is reminiscent of the old studio model from a few decades ago. If you want to fund a film, there are various different options that have been talked about. They have their pros, they have their cons. It's still very difficult. If you want to fund a game, you have one option. Sorry, you have two. You can mortgage your house, or alternatively, you can go to a publisher. That's the equivalent to a big studio. That's bad. It basically means you have very little option for how you're going to get funding for your game. So traditionally, You go to a publisher, you go through a big pitching process to the equivalent of commissioners. That process can be costly. It can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, which you have to pay for somehow out of your money just to get the commission. And then, having agreed to fund your project, they usually, or certainly used to take all the rights and all the profits when it came down to it. Outside of that, you had to find a way to fund it yourself or with a VC or angel. And the way the tax regime is set up, certainly in this country, is that that's not appropriate for almost any game. It can be appropriate if you're setting up a games company dealing with Facebook games these days. That's where everyone's investing in. But if you're making a particular game, equivalent to a particular film, it's exceptionally difficult to raise the money for it. Here's the good side. I was obviously trying to put across that it's not so good for us either. There is a real upside at the moment. Because of digital distribution, things like the iPhone, even things like Xbox Live Arcade, that's Microsoft's digital distribution, because of the web, there is now the opportunity for to create really high quality, independent, usually innovative and very creative content and make a living from it. In fact, some people have done extremely well from it. The opportunity never existed before because of all the different gatekeepers, and although there are somewhat different gatekeepers now and different difficulties, you can now go out and engage audiences in whole new ways. Most people here probably don't know about the independent game scene, where there are some games that have sold 1 million+ copies, and they were created by a team of 6 to 8 people, not in a bedroom, but in a pretty small, scabby office, where it's just brilliantly, either really innovative gameplay or brilliant. The artwork is really cool and very comic style, but very stylized. Sort of games, selling 1 million units is the sort of thing that only a really big game used to do. But now you can make a small game, but you can find an audience for it because there's a way to directly sell to them.
Do you think we're kidding ourselves by going for theatrical release, and we should be exploring more the kind of, whether it's on the web or using channels or following a gaming model?
I think that if it's sometimes appropriate to do a theatrical release, but it's a very expensive way of marketing a film that's going to make its money somewhere else, because so much of the revenue theatrically is scalped by not scalped, but the cinemas make a lot of the money and it doesn't trickle down anywhere else. So I think it's a really hard one to call, because I think that cinema shouldn't just be a marketing opportunity, but I think what you're saying with End of the Line, if 7,000 people saw it at the cinema, that could probably raised its profile in some way to sort of kick off the then awareness of millions of people further down the line.
With social docs, you're really looking at an engagement with an audience from the level of from even pre-production. Like if someone's already engaged in that issue, say for the Unloved, perhaps NSPCC, you could get them in right in the first day of writing. So we want to write a film about this issue. It's going to be a fiction feature, but you get their network of people who are already engaged in that topic, interested from the outset. So the kind of point of having the actual release is you've already got your network there who are going to watch it, who are going to buy DVDs, which is where you're probably going to make your money from anyway. And the point of the actual is kind of less of a need by that stage. And then what we're doing, Good Screenings, is this kind of non-theatrical measure where actually it's about people wanting to consume media at the point that they choose. So, BBC Canvas is all about kind of having a choice as to when you want to screen things and where.
The schedule for launching the platform is roughly Easter next year. So there's a whole team of people beavering away trying to figure out how we're going to present this. And they really want it to be a game-changing platform and thus make it available to anyone who wants to get content on there. They just haven't actually announced the process of being able to do that yet. But it's still fundamental to the success of the platform is the ability to engage people to put their own content on there. Be that a company like Warp or a bedroom filmmaker.